I stood in the middle of the dark forest, shrouded in a thick fog that seemed to swallow everything around me. My heart was pounding in my chest as I clutched my camera tightly, trying to steady my hands. My friends and I had come here to film a YouTube video, exploring the abandoned ruins of an old cabin deep in the woods. But as we made our way through the trees, something didn't feel right. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As we approached the cabin, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over me. The windows were boarded up, the door creaking on its hinges as we pushed it open. The inside was just as creepy as the outside, with moldy furniture and cobwebs covering every surface. But as we started to film, strange things began to happen. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of my vision, and I heard whispers echoing through the empty rooms. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. But as the night wore on, the unease only grew. The sound of footsteps outside, the feeling of a cold breath on my neck, it was all too much to bear. I knew we had to leave, but as we made our way back through the forest, the trees seemed to loom closer and closer. I could hear my friends screaming, but their voices sounded distant and distorted. Suddenly, something grabbed me from behind, dragging me into the darkness. I screamed, but no one came to my rescue. Now, as I lie here in this dark and twisted place, I can hear the whispers again. They're telling me things I don't want to hear. And I know that I'll never make it out of this forest alive. I struggled to break free, but the grip was too strong. My heart raced as I looked around, trying to make out any shape or figure in the darkness. But all I could see were the twisted branches of the trees, reaching out like gnarled fingers. Then I heard a low growl, deep and guttural. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once, surrounding me. I tried to scream for help, but my voice caught in my throat. My mind raced as I thought of all the horror movies I had watched, all the times the characters were trapped in a forest with no escape. Was this how it was going to end for me? As the growling grew louder, I felt something sharp brush against my arm. It was a claw, long and razor-sharp, and it sliced through my flesh like butter. I cried out in pain, but the growling drowned out my screams. I knew I had to fight back, to do something, anything, to get away. With all my strength, I twisted and turned, managing to break free from the grasp of the creature. I ran blindly through the forest, tripping and stumbling over roots and rocks. I could hear the creature chasing me, its growls getting closer and closer. But I didn't stop, didn't look back. I ran until my legs felt like they were going to give out, until I burst through the trees and saw the lights of civilization in the distance. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, and looked back into the darkness of the forest. The growls had stopped, but I knew the creature was still out there, waiting for its next victim. I never went back to that forest again, but the memories of that night still haunt me to this day. The growling, the claws, the feeling of being hunted, it's all burned into my mind. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the world is quiet and still, I swear I can still hear the creature's low, guttural growl, echoing through the trees. I thought I had escaped the horror of that forest, but the nightmare was far from over. The memories of that night haunted me for months, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, even in the safety of my own home. I started having nightmares, vivid and terrifying. I would dream that I was back in the forest, being chased by the creature, unable to escape. Every night, I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. And then one night, I woke up to find the creature standing at the foot of my bed. It was tall, taller than any human I had ever seen, with long, twisted limbs and a face that was part animal, part human. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, and its breath came in ragged gasps. I screamed and scrambled out of bed, but the creature was too quick. It grabbed me by the arm and dragged me back onto the bed, pinning me down with its weight. I could feel its hot breath on my face as it leaned in close, its eyes boring into mine. And then it spoke, in a voice that was deep and raspy. "You cannot escape me," it said. "I am always watching. Always waiting." And then it was gone, disappearing into thin air like it had never been there at all. I was never the same after that. I became paranoid, unable to trust anyone or anything. I stopped leaving my house, stopped filming videos, stopped living. In the end, it was the creature that claimed me. It took me back to the forest, where I was never seen or heard from again. And to this day, people still talk about the disappearance of the YouTuber and his friends, and the legend of the creature that haunts the forest. But only I know the truth, only I know the horror that lurks in the darkness. As I stumbled through the forest, trying to escape the creature's grasp, I realized that this was no ordinary forest. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like the hands of the dead. The ground was covered in a thick layer of fog that seemed to be alive, creeping and crawling like some sort of malevolent spirit. Every step I took was like wading through thick mud, my feet sinking deep into the soft earth. I heard strange noises, whispers and murmurs that seemed to come from all around me, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. And then, I heard the laughter. It was high-pitched and shrill, like the laughter of a child, but it was full of malice and cruelty. It sent shivers down my spine, and I knew that whatever was laughing was not human. The trees began to close in around me, their twisted branches clawing at my clothes and skin. I could feel their rough bark scraping against my flesh, leaving long, jagged scratches that burned like fire. And then, I saw it. The creature. It was standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me with glowing red eyes. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin was black as coal and its limbs were long and spindly. It had no face, only a gaping maw filled with razor-sharp teeth. I tried to run, but the creature was too fast. It caught up to me in seconds, its claws digging deep into my back. I screamed in agony as it dragged me back to the clearing, the laughter growing louder and louder with each passing moment. I knew then that I was doomed. The forest had claimed me, and there was no escape. The laughter echoed in my ears as the creature dragged me deeper into the darkness, and I knew that I was lost forever. The forest was alive, and it hungered for blood. And I was just another victim, another sacrifice to its insatiable appetite. As the creature dragged me deeper into the forest, I thought it was the end for me. But then, something strange happened. The laughter that had been ringing in my ears suddenly stopped, and the creature stumbled, as if it had been pushed from behind. I looked up and saw my friends, alive and well, standing at the edge of the clearing. They had managed to escape the creature and had come back for me. I couldn't believe it. I had thought that they were all dead, that the creature had claimed them too. But here they were, standing before me, offering me a chance at escape. We ran as fast as we could, pushing through the dense foliage and dodging the grasping branches. The creature pursued us, its breath hot on our heels, but we didn't stop. We couldn't stop. We had to get out of the forest. Finally, we burst through the trees and into the bright sunlight. We collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath and shaking with adrenaline. But the relief was short-lived. As we looked back at the forest, we saw something that made our blood run cold. The trees were moving, their branches writhing and twisting like serpents. And then, they started to close in on us, forming a wall of wood and leaves that stretched as far as the eye could see. We realized then that the forest was alive, and it was angry. We had escaped the creature, but now we were trapped, surrounded by a living, breathing nightmare. And that's when the second plot twist hit. It wasn't the creature that was the true terror of the forest. It was the forest itself. We were never seen or heard from again, just another group of victims claimed by the twisted, malevolent spirit that lurked in the heart of that cursed place. And so, the legend of the forest continued to grow, spreading like a virus through the minds of those who dared to enter its boundaries. But the truth remained hidden, known only to those who had experienced the horror firsthand. The truth that sometimes, the real monster isn't what you think it is. As we stood there, staring at the wall of trees that surrounded us, a feeling of dread crept over us. We knew then that we were not alone in the forest, that there was something else watching us, waiting for us. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of our own breathing. We couldn't hear the creature anymore, but that didn't mean it wasn't still out there, lurking in the shadows. We knew that we had to keep moving, to find a way out of the forest before it was too late. But every step we took was met with resistance, as if the forest itself was trying to hold us back. The trees seemed to move of their own accord, their branches reaching out to snag our clothes and scratch our skin. The ground was slick with moss and rotting leaves, making each step treacherous and uncertain. And then, we heard it. A low, guttural growl that echoed through the trees. It was closer now, much closer than before. We knew that the creature was still hunting us, and that it was getting closer with each passing moment. We started to run, our feet pounding against the ground as we pushed ourselves to go faster. But the forest was closing in around us, its twisted branches forming a maze that seemed to have no end. The growling grew louder, more insistent, and we knew that we were running out of time. We could feel the creature's hot breath on the back of our necks, its claws scraping against the bark of the trees. And then, we saw it. The creature was standing in front of us, its glowing red eyes fixed on us with a malevolent intensity. Its teeth were bared, and we could see the drool dripping from its jaws. We froze, unsure of what to do. We were trapped, with nowhere to run and no way to fight back. But then, we heard another sound. A sound that we had never heard before in the forest. It was the sound of a car engine, and it was coming from outside the forest. We looked at each other, hope flickering in our eyes. Could it be possible? Had we finally found a way out? With renewed energy, we pushed past the creature and raced towards the sound. The forest seemed to fall away behind us, and we burst out into the open air. There, parked at the edge of the forest, was a car, its engine still running. We piled into it, our hearts racing with adrenaline and relief. As we drove away from the forest, we looked back at it, knowing that we had survived a nightmare that few others had. We didn't know what we had encountered in that forest, but we knew one thing for sure: we never wanted to go back. As we drove away from the forest, the weight of what we had experienced slowly began to sink in. We were lucky to have made it out alive, but we knew that the memories of what had happened would haunt us forever. But just as we thought the nightmare was over, the car suddenly lurched to a stop. We looked around, confused, and realized that we were no longer on a road. We were in the middle of the forest again, but this time, it was even darker and more sinister than before. We tried to start the car again, but it wouldn't budge. We were trapped, once again, at the mercy of the forest. And then, we heard a voice. A voice that we recognized all too well. It was the voice of our friend who had been taken by the creature earlier. But how could that be possible? We had seen her die. She emerged from the shadows, her body twisted and contorted, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She wasn't the same person we had known, but a creature of the forest, one of its many victims transformed into a vengeful spirit. We knew then that we were truly doomed, that there was no escaping the forest or the horrors that lurked within it. We were trapped in a never-ending cycle of terror and death, unable to break free from the curse that had claimed us. And just when we thought that things couldn't get any worse, we heard another sound. A sound that was all too familiar. It was the sound of laughter, the same laughter that had been ringing in our ears when we first entered the forest. We looked at each other, realization dawning on us. The laughter hadn't been coming from our friend or the creature. It had been coming from the forest itself, from the malevolent spirit that controlled it. We were nothing more than pawns in its twisted game, and we had fallen right into its trap. The triple plot twist hit us like a ton of bricks, shattering any hope we had left of surviving. And so, we were claimed by the forest, just like so many others before us. We became part of its dark legacy, our fate forever intertwined with the horrors that lurked within its twisted depths. And as the laughter echoed through the trees, we knew that we were never truly alone. The forest would always be there, waiting for its next victim to claim. Thanks for watching. Information with you. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.